What you have now is what you might call a paradox. Let's take Sam Harris's confused view, because I think in some ways he speaks well for the blue team myopia. What Sam Harris says is, I acknowledge that the institutions are compromised in an unacceptable way, but you're far better off with the institutions than out in the Wild West trying to do your own research or whatever he wants to demonize. Now, here's what you now know. That's not true. You watched, if you saw that clip, which you can check out, Jimmy Dore and I spoke about the clip of the Pfizer execs in Australia being questioned where they couldn't give any explanation at all of how myocarditis might arise from their shots. We can give a perfectly coherent one. Turns out laboratory work bears it out. They can't give any answer. They can't say it might be one of four things and lay them out even in, who are these people? So what you now know is that various people, right? You have Peter McCullough, Mark Girardeau, you have us, all spotted this issue. David Wakefield, that ought to make you think. You have all of these folks who spotted that the brochure, if you will, of these vaccines, what we were told about how they were supposed to work, predicts this pathology if you simply extrapolate from it properly. Zach, do you want to put up that Pfizer diagram of how their so-called vaccine works? All right, here's Pfizer's own cartoon of how the vaccine works. And I borrowed this from a tweet of Mark Girardeau's.
And this is, how do we know? Is there a date on this?
When
is this from?
I don't know, and I don't think it matters.
Okay.
How does an mRNA...
But as far as you know, they still vouch for this. This is still...
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with their diagram. Okay. But the point is, what it is a cell that has picked up lipid nanoparticle-coated mRNAs, transcribed a foreign protein, and exported it to its surface. That's all you need to know if you understand how the immune system works in order to spot that it is at least a question whether or not this is going to trigger your own system to attack your cells. And then that will lead you to the obvious question of, well, which cells are going to do the transcribing? Well, they told us the cells that were going to do the transcribing were going to be in your deltoid. As soon as you know that that's not true, you have a four-alarm fire. So this was all deducible. Why is it that the Academy didn't deduce it? Why is it that the obviously excellent scientists who were capable of sorting out this mechanism and finding the empirical evidence that it exists, why is it that they haven't been thinking this was a likely explanation all along? Or if they were thinking it, why they didn't lay it out as a pre-existing hypothesis here? So,
well, you know the answer. You've already said why. It's the money.
It's the money, but more
in part, at many different both money scales and temporal scales.
So now I want to flip this question on its head, and I want to give you the scariest observation of all that comes out of everything we saw during COVID. It was very easy to outthink the experts. Doesn't mean it was easy to do. Outthinking experts is tough, but they were thinking so feebly that it was very easy to outpace them. It was very easy to get ahead, and get ahead doesn't mean be more compelling. Get ahead means be more predictive. See things coming ahead of time that the experts claim not to have known were coming. Now, we don't know if they were lying or they're too dumb to get it, but it doesn't matter. The lesson here is one that actually you will have heard hinted at many times on Dark Horse. You may remember a conversation that I had with Steve Patterson, in which Steve Patterson and I had both come up with the idea that we were living in a dark age. Steve Patterson puts the beginning of that dark age earlier than I do, but it doesn't much matter. The idea that this vibrant technological sphere in which we live is actually a cryptic dark age in which our scientific tools are artificially feeble because our belief structure is interfering with their use. That's where we are, and the evidence that that's where we are is now in plain sight. You have a novel technological mechanism being deployed massively across the globe that was foreseeably going to do damage to all your tissues, including your heart. That was foreseeable based on what was understood. And the people who were supposed to do the foreseeing couldn't see it. What do you have? You have dissidents on the outside saying, here's a problem. It's evident that it will be real. Why are we not looking at it? And the answer is, oh, well, those are quacks. Those are quacks. You can just, look at their Wikipedia pages. They're quacks. These aren't people you'd listen to. You've got to listen to the institutions because as frustratingly flawed as they may be, they are the gold standard. No, they are not.
They're not quacks.
Well, they are and they're not. They are the official quacks. And the actual quacks don't quack at all. Some of them.
That got very confusing.
It did get confusing. Well, that's the way with ducks.
Confusing clade.
They are a confusing clade. Mm-hmm. But anyway, point being, what I learned in graduate school is that a stuck field is easy to beat. Doesn't mean it's easy to get credit, doesn't mean it's easy to get heard, but if you just simply want to understand the world better than people in a stuck field, all you've got to do is free yourself from obligations to their sacred principles, right? That works. You've now seen it happen with COVID, where people who just simply were not part of that system, either freed themselves from it or weren't part of it in the first place, were able to figure out what was coming ahead of everybody else. That ought to terrify you, because what that says is that all of those fields in which the so-called experts were minted are broken. They are incapable of protecting your health. And that includes medicine, it includes virology, it includes vaccinology, it includes the entire regulatory apparatus. These things are broken, and I would claim beyond repair. That's not a good thing, but nonetheless, the evidence is right there. So that's where we are, and it does suggest that this dark age is having implications in ways that are not abstract and theoretical. This isn't some, discussion to have in your speakeasy. This is actually a material emergency in which we have vaccinated a good fraction of the people on planet Earth with something that never should have been injected into them. And we did so even though there were foreseeable harms that some of us tried to raise the alarm about. And instead of listening to those people and saying, hey, that's a good point, maybe we ought to study that, we were demonized and belittled. And okay, that didn't work, but it could have. It worked better than it should have. So that's a pretty dire picture. But it is now a picture supported by the evidence, right? We don't have to wonder whether or not Peter McCullough is a quack who was once well published in his field, but now he's become a compromised marginal thinker. Nope, he was right. His colleagues who didn't see this and injected who knows how many people, they were wrong. That's where we are.
Yep, that is where we are. And I don't know if it will be recognized.
Well, it has to be. And I do have the feeling in the last week that again, we've been talking about this issue of your own cells producing foreign proteins and triggering an autoimmune response that damages your own heart. We've been talking about that since February of 22. Right now, August of 23, that idea is finally lodging in enough minds, in enough public discussion. Something about that Offit piece caused this now to be a question, because maybe presenting that hypothesis in isolation doesn't work, but presenting it as a competing, everybody's heard of spike protein, everybody knows that they're supposed to fear it. And then when Paul Offit overplayed his hand and tried to blame the spike protein for everything, it made it possible to say, here's why, as good as that sounds, as much as that sounds like an admission of what they did wrong, it's actually the opposite, that allowed this to break into public. I don't know that the genie goes back in the bottle on this one. I think they may have screwed this up now in the same way that they screwed up lab leak, and I think we may finally be able to have this discussion in a sober way.
I hope you're right. I think genies are going back in bottles all the time, not by actually stuffing genies back in bottles, but by it's like the genie metaphor equivalent of dilution being the solution to pollution. You kind of like, there's so many genies out there, and there's so many misdirections. There are so many things that you can draw people's attention to over there. Will it be another new virus? Will it be another new war? Will it be another visit from aliens? There's a lot of places to distract people, and then coming back to this, oh God, COVID again. Must we?
Well, I'll tell you how we're gonna know, I think.
Oh, I think we'll know. I just have little faith that it will actually happen, because I think we are up against something that is not willing to lose.
Well, I don't care. I mean, it lost Lab Leak. It lost Lab Leak, and it is now losing control of this one. And it is gonna have to face up to this, because if it tries to load other things into that mRNA platform and it has a repeat on myocarditis and pericarditis, which is effectively inevitable, then people are going to know. They're going to know what they're looking for. So here's how I think we will know whether or not this one has finally crossed a threshold where they can't re-obscure it. Mm-hmm. There are many people who have played a net positive role on COVID, some of whom I like very much personally and in terms of their professional contribution, but who have had what I would call a misplaced caution over what to do about COVID. And their caution has caused them to stop short of saying things like what Peter McCullough has said, which is there needs to be an immediate halt to this vaccination campaign. It should stop completely, right? Others have said, well, maybe we should limit it and stop injecting it into people who are comparatively unthreatened by COVID because they're young and healthy, etc. Maybe we just limit it to people who are old or enfeebled or both. And that has never been right. It never made any sense, because these inoculations are, just for starters, not only are they structured in a way that should be presumed to cause this pathology. As soon as you know they don't stay in the deltoid, is there a way to keep them out of your heart? Nope, it's not there. Therefore, that's a risk. But they are also a double violation of Nuremberg. Nuremberg...
The way that they were deployed.
Yes, it's not the technology itself, but the fact that it was injected into people who were led to believe that these things were safe and effective means that those people were not informed. So they couldn't engage in informed consent because they were not informed. And in fact, there was a systematic campaign designed to prevent them from becoming informed. And then they were coerced. And the fact is, both of these things are forbidden. Informed consent has to not be coerced, and it has to be correctly informed, not misinformed. So you have a double violation of Nuremberg. And my point would be there's no principle by which Nuremberg should ever be violated. The fact that we did violate it, and now we have a huge population of people that can tell us something new about the pathologies and who they afflict most, is irrelevant. You don't get to inject some huge fraction of the population and then figure out what the dangers are and then, back off your vaccination campaign and exclude some people from it. These things were not properly tested. They sped them right past all of the things that would have told us that this was true, either in animals or told us this was true in a small number of unfortunate people who were part of a clinical trial. And so what I want to know is when those folks are going to recognize that what's on the table, what we now know about the pathologies emerging from this are serious, they are well supported by evidence, they are not rare, and that means that nobody should be injected with these things, not another one. And that was true from the beginning. Now it's very, very clear it's true. So I'm waiting to see all of those folks who have been advocating for a voluntary process of getting vaccinated with this stuff, or a limited process where we vaccinate the vulnerable, or whatever it is. None of those things make any sense in light of what we now know. And I am expecting that those people in that group with integrity, which is a great many, are going to have to reconcile themselves to the idea that caution about backing off the vaccine program is not where it should be. The caution should have been in deploying it, and halting it should be something we do instantaneously now that we know what we know, and we should have done it all along.
I agree, obviously, that we should have done it all along. I do wonder to what extent politics affects even the good people in a non-egregious way, such that some people who have been advocating for, not giving these products to the young and healthy, and and paying specifically attention to the risk stratification of both the disease and the vaccine, could begin to be heard, just as we could begin to be heard, more effectively by coming at it in stages. And that truth is not inherently nefarious.
I agree. All I'm saying is, I don't think that was ever what was unknown about these inoculations was substantial enough that objection to the entire process was correct from the beginning. I do understand that people, as the authors of this paper, are caught in a bind, that many of the high integrity folks have been caught in a bind.
There's lots of stuff that you and I know, that you and I know that we don't say.
Sure.
Right? And that should be true for all intelligent people who are speaking publicly about things for which a majority of people have been sold a bunch of lies.
Right, but that's my point, is whatever process led people to say less than they knew or to understand less than they should have, that's gone. At this point, any reasonable person looking at the evidence who has integrity should be on the side of, wait a minute, what did we do?
Mm-hmm.
This should never have happened, and if it should never have happened, no part of it should be continuing, period, the end. So that is what I am hoping for, and that is what I am expecting if those folks are up to the challenge. And it's not going to be easy because, of course, as we started this discussion, within the academy, there is a religion that requires you to mumble the right kinds of words in order not to be viewed as a heretic. So, okay, the question is, can you now join the heretics long enough for what should have happened long ago to happen now? And I really hope that it does.